Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and today I thought I would talk about the horror books or horror adjacent books that I've read that are not Stephen King related. You guys know I'm a big fan of Stephen King. I know not everybody is. A lot of people have issues with Stephen King. He puts content. There's some content in his books that not everybody's comfortable with, and and I understand that. And it's your prerogative if you don't want to read Stephen King. But I really enjoy him. I think he's a good writer, and I like most of his stories. I won't read everything by him. And I think he makes great character and develops great characters, But I wanted to try other books by other authors in that horror genre. Um, but I am a little picky, and I'm still kind of used to like watching horror films and stuff. And but I've been trying different authors that I hear about. And there are some stuff in here that I think would be considered horror, or like they'd be considered another kind of genre as well. So I don't know. But I did grow up. Okay, so I grew up in middle school. I did grow up reading Goosebumps, and I really enjoyed those. It's that other. In case you don't know, it was that big series by R.L. Stine. Horror, like middle grade horror series where it's still family friendly, but was creepy enough to scare the pants off you when you were a kid. They had those cheesy, fun covers. It's been reprinted quite a few times. It had a TV series in the 90s. After the book started coming out, which I feel like I watched the show more than I read the books. But I had a few of them. And I would get them from the library, and I did read some of his series beyond that as well. Those ones that I don't know if it was Fear Street, but the ones that were the books were they were hardback, and they were naked hardbacks. They were black, but they had the image on the cover like his middle grades, like the original Goosebumps, which may be because he used the same artist for them. I don't know. And actually, the artist has gone to conventions a couple times. I've not met him, but maybe if he comes again, once my mom and I agree that we're comfortable enough that I can go to a convention with Terry, then maybe I'll keep an eye on and see if he returns to one of these conventions and get his interact with him, get his autograph. I mean, I wish I had a Goosebumps book to for him to sign, but I don't. So I donated them at some point in my life. I don't know if it was before we moved or even before that, way before that. I have thought about collecting. Like, I was inspired. I can't remember which booktuber it was, but I have thought about collecting them again. But there were a lot of series I grew up with that I have thought about collecting them again, and they're a lot of them are longer series, like the Goosebumps, and what was that other one? There was another series I was just thinking of that had a lot of Animorphs. Animorphs was another one, and then there was another one I was just thinking of. Now I can't remember that one. There was another one that isn't horror, like Animorphs is not horror genre. The Dragonlance books. I really enjoyed that. That was kind of probably the closest to adult that I got to in middle school. An adult series. But anyway, back to the horror. So I read Goosebumps, and like most people, I absolutely love the Haunted Mask. I'm trying to think of. I cannot remember. That's the only one I remember. Off the top of my head, as far as the books go. I mean, there's Don't Go in the Basement. basically the only one I remember is the one with the haunted mask one. Which now to this day I'm creeped out by mask, and a mask that'll cover your whole face and like goes over you. That to this day, that those kinds of masks really creep me out. I don't mind the ones that just go over the eyes, although those can be creepy too. But the ones that cover your whole face, that creeps me out. Which is funny because I love Jim Carrey's The Mask, but it doesn't in a comedic way. But that could easily be construed in a horror kind of way too. Like, you know, those fake trailers they make where they turn it, they add like music and stuff, and to make it like a horror. I could see them, you know, they could do that for that one. But anyway, and then you know, a lot of my horror was mostly consumed by watching movies and TV shows. I didn't read a lot of horror. And then when the year we moved here, I was trying to keep track of what I was reading, like joining Goodreads and, you know, trying to make a chart to record what I was reading. Which I'm not very good at, like, drawing straight lines and stuff like that. I need a ruler. So I had a hard time making, like, a perfect, nice chart for that, you know, to record it. So I do appreciate, like, Goodreads, and I still appreciate Goodreads, even though it hasn't been updated, since it was first created. But I read one of his first forays into adult books, and that was Red Rain, and it was like these two. It takes place in it starts in South Carolina during hurricane season, which apparently our main character did not bother to look up and check the weather before she went. I know hurricanes can kind of sneak up on you, but they usually know ahead of time. But and she finds these two boys that supposedly their parents were killed, and apparently they're British, they're from England. There's these two twins, and she brings them home because she immediately falls in love with them, wants to take care of them, brings them home, and the rest of their family's not too keen on them, especially the kids, and they start hypnotizing everybody, and they're really creepy and have that, you know, cliche British accent, like that really over the top one, and like I could hear it in my head how they sounded. It's kind of annoying. I mean, normally I love the British accent, but sometimes the over the top version of it can get really annoying. Which is funny because it wasn't like I was reading the book, but I could hear it in my head, like I said, which doesn't happen all the time. And it was just like, first of all, like, mind control hypnosis creeps me out. Like, the idea of someone taking away your free will by controlling your mind is really creepy, because they can make you do anything. You know, I definitely do that. That makes me, makes me nervous. And they hypnotize everybody, starting with the kids, because they know that the kids don't like them or are a threat to them, so they target them first. And it's really creepy and weird, and it's just like. And then one of the things that really bugged me was that the woman's, she was a travel vlogger, and so she was always out of town, I guess. So her husband was cheating with his secretary, which I think secretary or assistant, I don't remember. It's been like I read this when we first moved here 5 years ago, so I barely remember it. And he's cheating, and all because his wife is never around and leaves him unsatisfied. He feels abandoned by her, I guess, and that I don't condone cheating. If you feel neglected, then talk about it, or call Dr. Laura. If you have a Dr. Laura in that community, or like a therapist, go see a therapist. Don't go cheating on your spouse. And he never got caught, and that bugged me. And there was never, I mean, if he doesn't get caught, at least have some consequences. Like one of them, like the girlfriend dies or something, or the guy dies. Like in Tommyknockers, the character cheats on his wife, and I think his lover kills him or something, or, so at least there was some kind of consequence. And that's which I want to read that, Tommyknockers. I want to actually, I'm going to at some point read that book. But, because I do have the miniseries and I watched it. I'm trying not to watch the Stand miniseries, and I maybe wait on the new one, but that book is super long. Um, but anyway, we're not talking about Stephen King just yet. I'm going to do a separate video for Stephen King. But it was basically like a Lifetime movie. That's what it felt like. That's what it read like. But it wasn't focused on the woman's and her drama or anything like that. It was more focused on, like, it was like more focused on the town and how these kids were affecting hypnotizing and mind controlling everybody. And it was not that great. It was kind of cheesy, and I don't know. And I get that the transition from middle grade books to adult, although maybe not, because he's been transitioning for a while. And maybe I'm just realizing how maybe what he does for kid YA and middle grade doesn't necessarily work for adult books. It's like almost too cheesy. Like, and I think it was his first one. Like, I think it was his debut into adult literature. So, it was just not that great. I mean, I feel bad, but because it's R.L. Stine, I liked R.L. Stine when I was a kid, but, it was not that great and annoyed me. And, like, I didn't rage quit it. I read the whole thing. But, like, this was before I was really fully into doing this and did not realize, the concept of DNFing. So, yeah, that was the early, well, with the exception of Red Rain. So Red Rain was not that early. It was, only 5 years ago. But before we moved here, I got into Interview with a Vampire. Like, my friend Jessica, my best friend Jessica at the time, was into vampires. So she was kind of the reason I decided to check out Interview with a Vampire and read it. I did read it, but it's been so long, so I barely remember it. I'm going to watch the show, by the way. I'm probably a minority here in being excited about the show. I know most people are not excited because some of the changes they made from the book series, and it's already been adapted once. Although, to be fair, this is a TV series, and their intention is to cover all the books, not just the one book, which they have covered. They did 2 books, but they didn't cover the whole series. Like, they did Queen of the Damned and Interview with a Vampire. Back in the late 90s was when Interview with a Vampire, the movie came out, I think. But, I mean, I thought the book was cool and everything, but I barely remember because I wasn't super attached to it. I had a good time with it at the time, but I think the only reason I even attempted is because of my best friend, because of Jessica. She was into it, so I was like, I want to get into it too. I think I was definitely one of those kids where if my friends did something, I wanted to do it too. If they were into something, I wanted to try it out. Now I'm kind of the opposite, where I want to do my own thing, and I don't want to share everything with my friends. Like, whether it's books, or shows or movies, although there are some things I want to share. Like, some books, especially because my friends, I want to share my books with them, or at least have someone to talk to about my books. But at the same time, I want something, but I'm also, like I said, I'm also the opposite, where I don't want to share every single thing. I want to have something to myself, as far as, like, books and movies and TV shows. But it is fun to be part of something, like, whether it's just you and your friend, or everybody's into it. It is fun. I get the appeal of that. That's how I felt when I was younger. But now, like I said, I still like that, but at the same time, I want to have something to myself. So anyway, let me get off topic again. And I liked Interview with the Vampire at the time. I did like it, but I didn't get super attached to it. I think I kind of preferred the lighter version of the vampire lore, nothing too too erotica, not too much erotica at the time. Although Anne Rice is not that, it doesn't have that as much, except for I did read her Beauty trilogy, and I was not into that one. I only continued because I want to see the character break free of that situation that she's in. But then halfway through book 2, or towards the end of book 2, I don't remember when I quit, but I was like, fine, okay, I'm done with this. I'm just gonna get rid of these books. I'm not gonna pick them up again. But I liked Anne Rice's writing style. Remember, I liked it. And I liked how she really dove deep with her books. Like, they're long, but she really dove deep into the history of the characters and really exploring that. And I think that's really easy to do when you're dealing with supernatural human-like creatures. Like vampires and witches, which is the other books that she writes. She writes werewolves, which is vampires. I think she wrote one book that was about a mummy. Like, horror is one of those genres where you could explore the past to like historical fiction. Depending on the type of horror you're doing. You could give a reason and a backstory to the horror that's going on in the present. Which I really like. And I guess I kind of like them. Like, I like both longer horror and the shorter stuff as well. But I think I like the longer stuff a little bit more than the shorter stuff. But I think horror for me works. But I think the short stories that are horror stories work better for me than short stories that are a different genre. I've tried other authors, like Dickens, for instance. I love Dickens, and I tried his works, his shorter works, his short stories, and I just couldn't get into them. They felt like, again, that feeling I get when I read a lot of short stories where it feels like I'm just being dropped into a scene, like a one-shot, as they call it in fan fiction. But horror short stories, I think, can potentially work because the horror sometimes what makes it more scary is if it just happens so quickly, or you don't really have time to dive too deep. I think that's why sometimes short stories can work really well in the horror genre, because short stories, they're short. So they don't waste too much time exploring too much. But I am also the person who likes the longer works as well. And it's probably because I read Stephen King. And his books, most of his books are super long. So I am actually excited about the TV show adaptation for Interview with the Vampire. And I was one of those people who did get into Twilight. I was team Edward. I did not like Jacob. But that's not horror, so this is not Let's Talk About Twilight video. Okay, so after that, let me go ahead and show this one now, because I read this one years ago, and then I read this one again 2 years ago. That is Dracula. This is kind of one of the first, I should say, because Carmilla came before this one, but I have not read Carmilla yet. This is a classic, and I've read this, and at the time, I thought it was just okay, and I like it a little bit better now, but I still don't love Dracula. But this is one that I think if you like vampires, at least try it. At least try Dracula and see if you get into it. But it might not be for everybody because it's not as action packed. It's mostly like diary entries and journal entries, and there's only certain parts that are really exciting and action packed. A lot of it I can see where a lot of it could be potentially boring at times, like a lot of characters observing things and talking about things and talking about their feelings. Although I think it is an interesting way to tell it because it's diary entries and I think that is a very interesting, unique technique to tell this kind of story because it gets personal and allows you to be inside of the head of the main characters, with the exception of Dracula, which, by the way, that's another thing that I think would potentially take away the appeal of this book is Dracula's not in the book that much. He's in the beginning, and then he disappears for a long time, and then he comes in at the end. So there's not, even though it's a Dracula, it's mostly like he's the shadow in the background, the threat that is looming, that, it's like we're, talking, the characters are talking about it and thinking about it, but like I said, he doesn't really make too many appearances in the book, so I feel like that can potentially take away some of the appeal of Dracula. And of course, I personally like the writing. Like, this is the kind of writing I like when it comes to, like, writing in first person. When the person sounds when the person doesn't sound all modern and, like, I don't like reading modern first person, because it almost sounds like the person is whining and complaining. Like, that's the only, I'm reading Discovery of Witches right now, and that's the only thing is it's in first person most of the time. But Deborah Harkness also, there's a few chapters that are in the perspective of Matthew Claremont, but it's not in first person. It's in third person. So that's my only issue, but I like the plot and the story of that one, despite the Twilight-esque feel to it, to Discovery of Witches. But I think the stakes are even higher in that one, and it's not just our lovers that have to deal with where the conflict affects. But anyway, I do like the end pages. Like, I really love these editions. I need to collect more of these because I really like these. But it's so hard to decide which books, which editions of the classics that I want to get, because there's with these Russian classics, there's a new edition I've recently discovered that I really like, and the same thing with the Shakespeare, and they're all at Barnes & Noble, and we don't have a Barnes & Noble close by. But it's gotten to the point where, even though I'm a member, I'm not, I was a member, but I'm not renewing my membership as of next year, because it's like, there's no point of having a membership if I'm not there that often, and when I buy books, if I buy books online, it's either Amazon or Thrift Books. I mean, I have a Discovery, not Discovery, but the other main book depository. I have an account for that too, and I only use that once so far since I've had it. But anyway, so it's like, I feel like you should try it, but like I said, there's things about it that vampire fans might not love. So that's the only thing. But like I said, if you're a vampire, I think it's kind of cool to check out the original story, one of the original vampire stories, one of the ones that kind of started the vampire craze. Although technically did not start it, because I think when it came out it wasn't as popular. And it's very interesting because, and I've talked about this before, how Bram Stoker really believed in vampires. And when he wrote this book, he told his agent it was a warning that vampires were real. But his agent didn't want to make everyone freak out because, of course, this is a time when people were very superstitious and afraid, and very superstitious and paranoid. So he was like, "You can't do that." And so he does take out some scenes in this, I believe, and had to change it so it felt like an actual story and not like he was trying to pass it off as nonfiction. And as I talked about also before, I think it would be interesting to study vampires, and if they were, it would be absolutely terrifying. It scared me shitless if vampires are real, but at the same time, you can't help but be fascinated with them. And I would love to take a class and study them, study like vampire literature and the vampiric disease that make people, like for werewolves, it's hypertrichosis, where you have excessive body hair that just keeps growing, and that's the whole Wolfman disease. Well, I think there is a blood disease where you think you're a vampire, or you have vampiric tendencies, or what is considered vampiric tendencies, because I guess back then people wouldn't have known. But people also compare this to the historical figure of Vlad Dracula, because he was very bloodthirsty, and that's originally what people assumed that Dracula was based off of him, because there are some similarities, and obviously it's set in Transylvania, and this guy is a Transylvanian prince. But other sources say that no, that's not what, it was not inspired by that. People just projected that idea onto the book. But there is a possibility that he could have been influenced by it still. I still wonder. And actually, let me go and talk about, we have this book, which is by his relative, Bram Stoker, and partnered up with J.D. Barker. I heard about this book from Darlene Desi, in 2020 or 21, I cannot remember. Like I was watching her video where she talked about books that she reads this time of year, and this was one of the books that she read. And there's an author's note where it talks about him writing Bram Stoker writing Dracula, because this is actually an origin story, a fictionalized origin story of Bram Stoker's life and why he wrote Dracula. He encounters two vampires technically. He had a nanny who, he was a very sick boy growing up in this story. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I'm assuming it is. And so he had a nanny who gave him blood, and so he has some of the vampiric tendencies, but he's not a vampire yet. And the nanny ends up getting fired, but he was very close to her, so he wants to find her and find out what happened to her, because he tried to contact her and she just disappeared from his life. And with help from his sister and brother, they try to find her, and she may or may not be a vampire. So I thought it was really cool. If you have read Dracula, enjoyed it, I think checking this out would be a really great opportunity. And it does have the author's note where it talks about the stuff that I just told you about, with how Bram Stoker really believed in vampires. And it has, like, it works on some of the elements that might not be as appealing in the original book. It changes them up, but it still has the same format as this book does. But I think if you have a soft spot for Dracula, or are a fan of the original Dracula, then I think this might be a good book to check out, because, like I said, I mean, it's basically is the origin story of Dracula. So read these. So I would recommend reading these two together. That would be really nice. So let's see. Let me look. Let me see. Look at this, because some of these I don't have. Okay, well, I also, one of the ones I don't have is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. That one, the horror isn't as intense, or it's more subtle. It's more like one of those where it's like, is this really happening, or is it in the minds of our main characters? And it explores Native American culture too, so that's a plus. I like how it explores that. And I'm guessing the author is indigenous or Native American. Because he does write, like, a lot of his books takes place in the Native American culture. Like, I think, the one, My Heart is a Chainsaw, was in, on a reservation, and I think the main character might have been Native American. I'm not sure, but I ended up DNFing the book, and it was more because I just didn't like I wasn't sure how I felt about being in the main character's head. And I just wasn't feeling the book. But the only good is it's a revenge story. Like, these group of guys who were hunters back in the day killed this one, I think it was a deer. So the mama deer is haunting them and seeking revenge for them killing her baby or something, or killing her. And it's also one of those books that probably has a message, but it's not like in your face. So it's a little different from like something like Dracula as far as the horror goes. But it was a really cool story, and kind of fun too. And like I said, I like that it explored a group of people that I don't know a whole lot about. Like, we get a little bit of their culture. And then let me go ahead and talk about some of the other ones I don't have. Okay, so I read Mexican Gothic, especially like a Jane Eyre, Rebecca type retelling. I think more Jane Eyre. Well, the one I read this year, The Hacienda, is more Rebecca as far as the premise goes. And actually, now that I think about it, no. Mexican Gothic is just, it explores more of the Gothic genre. Like, you have our main character who comes to try to rescue her cousin who finds herself trapped in a marriage where her life is in danger, and there is this creepy fungus in this creepy house, and it's really cool. It's a really fun, like, very dark and unsettling story. And like I said, it was another horror book that explores the culture that I don't know a lot about. It explores Mexican culture a little bit. Not a whole lot. And I would love to see that one adapted. I think that'd be really fun. And the same with The Hacienda, which also takes place in Mexico. Where our character is put in a position where she has to marry to protect herself and provide herself and her mother's security. She has to marry someone that she doesn't love. And again, like, there's, there might or might not be a haunting in this house. And again, very creepy, and has a lot of similar elements to Mexican Gothic, with the exception of, like, there's, obviously a different story, and explores more, it goes deeper into the history of Mexico a lot more. And there is a little bit of romance in the story. There's a potential love interest in the Hacienda. But it's a complicated love story, and it's like, it's gonna work out or not work out kind of situation. And I liked both those books. I like an exploring different culture, and I like that it was very creepy, and I would love to see both those adapted and seen on the screen. It might even terrify me more if I get it on the screen, because the books, I'm just reading the words. Yes, I could picture it, but if books don't scare, reading something doesn't scare me like watching a movie or a TV show. That would scare me more, and I would love to see those two adapted for that. And so we have. So another story I read earlier this year, back in at the early September, or August, was The Haunting of Ashburn House. This is YA, and apparently the author writes a lot of haunted house type stories. Like, I was looking at her books, and they're all the haunted manor or the haunted house, and like, this woman inherits this creepy house and the woman, she doesn't know who the woman is. She's like a great aunt to her. And there's something weird going on with this house, and there's all these crazy rumors, and the woman, her great aunt or whatever, her aunt has a very interesting reputation. Like, you don't know what to make of her. You don't know if she's a bad guy or not. And I did like how the twist in the story. I thought that was really cool, and how things work out in it. And the main character didn't bother me too much, but there was something that did bother me, where once she figured out, got a better idea of what's going on, she did not realize that she still was not figuring out that, oh wait, the fact that she scratched this message in the wood quite a few times, that must mean the candle is important. Lighting the candle is something I should do. I should consider trying. But no, she still doesn't figure it out until the climax, and it's like, if I would think that you would realize that if your aunt keeps carving that into the wood, that to remind herself, then I would think that would be important. But no, apparently she didn't think that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe as the reader, it's easier for me to come to that conclusion, to realize that, and as the character who's scared shitless. But yeah, that kind of bugged me. And I really love the small towns. I like small town stories. I think that provides a really cool, almost isolated mystery or closed circle mystery in a way. It's even though because it's a small town, so there's only no, you're not in a locked room or anything. You're not in one place, but you're still in an isolated situation because it's just you and all the rest of the townsfolk. And of course, she's kind of trapped in this house. As well, it's kind of hard for her to leave. I do like that we have these this group of women that are like the Stepford wives kind of thing. And you don't know what to make of them. You don't know if you can trust them or not. They're really creepy. There's something about them that's a little suspicious. But this one, it was okay. I didn't love it, but it was okay. I was still somewhat mildly entertained by it. And I'm not totally against reading something else by this woman. I definitely want to check out something by her, but I would rather get it from the library or get it really cheap. But that might not happen unless I can find Darcy Coates' work on audiobook. Then maybe that would be my way of checking out her books. Or either I'll just buy each of her books one at a time. But I have to be careful about that. Already, especially because it's not an author that I absolutely love. I'm just trying her out. So I can't go constantly buying the books, but unfortunately, they're not always going to be at my library. I don't always find these books at my library, which kind of bugs me, because people always make that suggestion, not to me specifically, but I hear that all the time on BookTube, that people say, you can go to your library, you don't have to buy books, you don't have to own them. But if you're interested to an extent to an author, and if I'm interested in an author like Darcy Coates, but I can't find them at the library, then what else am I going to do? Unless I can find them in a used bookstore for cheap. Or get them off Libby or something. But at the same time, she's not one of those authors that I'm like desperate to read. Like I said, the book was just okay. And then we have, so this is another one that I don't know if I'll keep reading this author's work, but this is an anthology, a collection of their other works. But I got this mainly because of the Sleepy Hollow story, which I should have got a cheaper copy. I really like these editions, and I want to read his other story. But after reading a couple of them, I'm debating about keeping it. I mean, I really should try to read more, but at the same time, it's like, do I keep going back and forth. Like, I have a hard time getting rid of, donating books and removing books from my shelf and deciding which ones to get rid of, because I haven't read all my books on there. And this was one of the ones I just grabbed. It was like, okay, I'll just get rid of this one. But this is a collection of Washington Irving's works, including the infamous The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which I was warned by Terry herself that the story itself is not not that great. But I'm glad I could say I've read it. And maybe one day my nephews and niece will read it. But, it was just kind of a letdown. There wasn't a lot of character development for the other two characters, this trio of main characters, which are Katrina von Tessel, Ichabod Crane, of course, and then Abraham von Braun, which is her boyfriend. And if I want to take in the original story, I can always watch that animated movie. With that they put in the animated adaptation on Disney Plus. I could watch it there every October if I want to read it, because I prefer Tim Burton's film with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci. I prefer that over the original story. It's such a big letdown, because it's like, basically, the characters are really annoying, including Ichabod. They're not likable at all, which, granted, I don't have to love my character. The characters don't have to be likable for me, but I want to at least enjoy reading their story, even if they're not a nice person or they're annoying. And I did not enjoy this story. I mean, there's implications, like it is one of those stories where it's like, did it happen, or is the character just crazy? Like, I'm all for the actual supernatural event happening, like they're actually being something supernatural, instead of it being like, did it or didn't happen, and oh, psych, it didn't actually happen. It was just the character's imagination. The character was just crazy or something, or he had mental health issues. I don't like that. I prefer where there's an actual supernatural aspect. But again, another one of those books where it's like, you almost feel like you should at least try it. The same with Dracula. Just to see. And this is a short story anyway, so it's not super long. I mean, I did feel long, though. But it's not a novel. Like, these are short stories. So, but it still felt kind of long for a story that doesn't have a lot going on for it. But I definitely prefer watching the Tim Burton film over this. Which that reminds me, I gotta watch Beetlejuice by him. Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. I gotta watch that one. I said it twice. If I say it one more time, that's not good. Just kidding. But, like, I'm glad I read it. But it just, at the same time, I almost wish I hadn't, because I knew it was not that great compared to, like, Tim Burton's film or like, other versions of the story. So, like, when people tell the story, they make it a lot scarier than it really is, put it that way. Because you can really, with your voice and everything, you can really make something really creepy and scary. wow, me just reading it takes it away a little bit. So like I said, it's one of these ones where you feel like you might want to at least try it. But really, I think you'll be fine just watching the Tim Burton film. Okay, so what am I going to talk about next? Okay. Yeah, I think I talked about. Okay, so I talked about all the ones I don't have. Let me go ahead and talk about this one because this is one where I don't know if it can be considered horror or not. It's actually not horror, but there's horror aspects to it. Because, so it's this guy, it's a perfect book to read. It's a perfect book to read this time of year, but it's not traditional horror. But it has some horrifyingness to it. This is Perfume by Patrick Susskind. I just read it, and it's basically about this guy who was born as this guy, Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. I don't know if I'm saying it right. I don't know French. But, and he was born, but his mom died. She had given birth to a lot of kids and didn't want to give birth to another child, but she did. I think she was a prostitute. And so she tries to kill him, but the baby gets rescued and taken to a convent. But then none of the nuns want to give him milk because he's greedy and he doesn't smell. He does not have a scent. He was born without a scent. And I agree, which there's a scene when the nun that's currently feeding him, sister, I do not remember her name, sister so and so, and she's talking to the priest, and is like, okay, this child is the devil's child. Something's wrong with him because he doesn't have a smell, and babies have a scent. Babies smell, not just stinky. They have a scent. Like, and the priest dismisses her concerns and thinks she's just mean to this little baby. And it's like, if you don't want him, then don't come with some silly story about and let your superstitions get the best of you. Just tell me you don't want him, and I'll go send him. Although he also kind of berated her about being like, it's her responsibility, it's her job because she can provide the milk. And it's like, which yeah, he's not wrong in that sense that women are the only ones who can produce the milk. But at the same time, it's like, just because she's a woman does not mean she has to keep this baby if she doesn't want it. Like, I had very mixed feelings on that particular scene in the beginning, and he takes the kid, and he, like, when he realizes that the kid doesn't have a smell, he tries to dismiss it and make some kind of excuse. But the kid basically, the little baby, doesn't smell, does not have a scent. But yes, babies do have a scent. They do have a smell. Not just the stinky smell like they poop themselves, but actually, I think there is a certain smell to babies. When you, like, holding my sister's kids when they're born, it was just, they have scent. Or my cousins when they were born, because they're much younger than me. They're teenagers. Late teens, early 20s. They're, like, there's a 10-year gap between me and the oldest. My oldest cousin on my mom's side of the family. And they have scent. There is a scent to a baby. It's not just a stinky scent, but there's a baby smell. So she isn't wrong there, but she couldn't really explain it. I don't think anyone can explain it. But there is something. If you hold a baby, there is a scent to the baby. Babies have a smell. I'm not talking about the stinky diaper smell. I mean, there's something about them. There's a softness, and then there's a scent to them. Anyway, sorry, I got off on that tangent there. But he has an excellent sense of smell. He doesn't smell himself. He doesn't have a scent, an odor. So I'm gonna say odor. Actually, I'll go ahead and say odor so it won't get confusing. He has an odor, or he doesn't have an odor, but he has a brilliant sense of smell. He can smell everything, and he is like obsessed with scents, even the stinky ones. And he's obsessed with getting this one particular scent. The scent of a beautiful girl, a virginal girl. And he resorts to murder to get that. Because it's all over her body, and he has to get it from her and bottle it up to make perfumes because he becomes a perfumer. And he also does not like people because there's so many smells that he can't take. It drives him crazy. I guess it's the same thing as if you were telepathic. Like, you hear so many voices that you just cannot stand it. Especially when a lot of those voices have dirty thoughts. So the fact that he murders people talks about how it has a bit of a scary element to it, and it's just a very uncomfortable story. Spending most of your time in this guy's head. So it's not traditional horror, like it's not a monster. Well, he is a monster, but not in the traditional like vampire, or like he's more of it's more of like a serial killer story. Um, so it kind of is. So it is horror and it isn't horror. Like it's I don't know if it would be labeled as such, but I did put it in the horror in my Goodreads. Um, so yeah, I do count it because the guy's murdering these women. He's like a serial killer. So I read this earlier this year, back in September, because I was trying to read in September. I was trying to read a little different books that weren't traditional horror, I was reading horror books, and I was trying to read some horror books in September. That's, I think, when I read The Haunting of Ashburn House. Because the original plan was to participate in Victober, like I always do, which is read Victorian literature in October. But I've recently been in the mood for witchy stories. And I think that could be because Hocus Pocus 2 came out on September 30th. Is on Disney Plus. Please check it out. It's really fun. It's a really fun story. It's like which I'm gonna have to see more reviews. Like I watched Kelly Clarkson's review and she loved it. She absolutely loved it and might have liked it a little bit more than the first one. I still kind of prefer the first movie, but I did really enjoy it. So I think that's probably why I'm kind of in a witchy mood right now. And I did pick up a Discovery Witches for Dark Academia Witch story, but yeah, please, I think this is worth, so this is really interesting. It might make you uncomfortable, but it's still worth a read. Okay, let's talk about some other classic horror. So, although the most recent reads by this author weren't horror necessarily, they were detective stories. Not Conan Doyle, but Edgar Allan Poe, and I read his 2 detective stories, and I just did not like them. But I remember really loving The Raven. And I tried to do my own version of an Edgar Allan Poe type story, but I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if it got thrown away. And it's sad because I was actually really proud of that. And I did a really cute paw print, like, dog/wolf print on there. But I remember being really proud of that and getting compliments from my mom and sister about that, and now it's gone. It probably got thrown away at one point. But I thought it was very Poe-esque. Which I wonder if you would consider Kafka's Metamorphosis as horror, because it's like the science fiction horror. Like, I debated about showing that I read Frankenstein 2. It's one of my favorites, because it's kind of science fiction-y. I mean, because you also have the science fiction horror genre, the subgenre of horror, science fiction. And that kind of is horror. So I wasn't sure if I should show you guys that one as well, but I did read that one. Along with The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, which is about a character that's mentioned in the original novel, Elizabeth, I think she marries Dr. Frankenstein, Victor. And I did attempt to read the Madman's Daughter, which is a Dr. Moreau retelling, or like a continuation, like kind of like what Sylvia Moreno Garcia's latest book, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, I think it's called. It's the same thing, but obviously it's a different story. So I read that, but I actually have not read the original Dr. Moreau, The Isle of Dr. Moreau. And actually, I read another retelling of that book. I cannot remember what it's called. I do have it on my Goodreads, where you have these teenagers that are part of a science program at their high school, and they win a chance to go on this trip. And they end up, 4 of them, and then they end up finding themselves on an island where you have a Dr. Moreau type guy. I don't know if he's actually Dr. Moreau, but and he is basically experimenting on them and turning them into half human, half animal type creatures. Which I thought was really cool. I don't have it anymore, but that was really. I wish I can remember if I can find it all. I'll maybe I'll post the Goodreads link or something on here. But anyway, so I read some of I'm familiar, and I remember in high school in an anthology we read the Cast of Monte Danilo, which is in this collection, which I'm really glad because I want to reread it. But I read The Fall of the House of Usher. That was a bit of a disappointment. But maybe the retelling that is coming out, or that already did come out, might be more intriguing. But I do feel like I need to reread it. It's like this guy reconnects with an old friend who ends up, his sister is very ill, and he might be getting the same thing, I think? Something like that. And he's telling his friend that story. And I also read from this collection, I'm trying to think of which ones. One of these is, oh no, I was thinking about Jekyll and Hyde. So I also read Robert Louis Stevens' Jekyll and Hyde. That was another big letdown. That was one of those ones where I wish it had been from Jekyll or Hyde's perspective. It was from an outsider's perspective. It was just the idea of running into they encounter Mr. Hyde, but we don't get a lot of time with that. And I think adaptations make that a lot scarier than it really is. It's always so weird when I hear a booktuber that I like loving something that I just find is really boring or disappointment, and they love it. I'm like, and I can't help but ask myself, what am I missing here? Katie from Books and Things loved Jekyll and Hyde, and that was one of those times where I was like, what am I missing here? I mean, everyone has different opinions and different taste. I get that. But sometimes it is weird when I hear someone absolutely love something that I just think, really? That was kind of, really? You like that? I mean, to me, it was a disappointment. It was a disappointment. But one of those stories in that collection, I'm trying to think, was it in that one or in here? There was a story with a guy with an evil twin that was he was worried that his twin was taking over his life. Or, oh, no, wait, I'm totally off. It's not neither one of those. It's actually, it might be a Tolstoy work. It's been so long since I read it. It's been, a little over 6 months since I read it. But it might be Tolstoy's work. Or, no, it's Dostoevsky's work. He wrote a story where he had a twin, where the main character had a twin. That's right. So, and then, let's see, what else? The two most recent were Murders in the Rue Morgue and The Mystery of Marie Roget. I still don't, like I said, I don't speak French, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing those correctly. And those are more detective stories than horror stories. But I also remember reading The Pit and the Pendulum, and I absolutely love that one. I need to reread that again, but I'm debating if I should read it now or wait until next year. Because you can't read something for the first time again once you read it. Although this won't be the first time. And I remember I heard a lot about The Black Cat being really good from Murphy Napier. But I think I'm going to read, maybe before we go, we're going to be taking a vacation soon. I'm going to read The Pit and the Pendulum. But I'll read The Mask of the Red Death and The Pit and the Pendulum. Because I remember really enjoying, like I said, I absolutely love The Pit and the Pendulum. I don't know why I did, but I did. So I like Poe's writing, but some of the stories, I do like that he writes a lot of different types of stories. Not just, there's some authors that write very similar types of stories. My issue with Conan Doyle's work, the Sherlock Holmes, it's a bunch of stories with the same formula. Like, I'm just, with detective stories, I'm more of a watch them kind of person. So, so that was most of my exposure to Poe. I need to get more into him. So that's why I'm going through these. I do have another collection. That Barnes & Noble hardback book. Leatherbound book, not the hardback. The leatherbound book. I have that, and it has all of his works in there. But I wanted to get something smaller that was easier to travel with. And I bought this one, and I also like these editions. Just this is the same as my although it's different. It's not the flexi. It's just not like the cover has a more cloth feel to it, but I think it's the same flexi bound. But yeah, that's how it was with Poe. I've read some of his works, but not all of it. Like I said, I might read The Mask of the Red Death soon, and then The Pit and the Pendulum. And then, I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year when I read, yeah, I think it was last year, Something Wicked This May Come. And I remember watching the movie adaptation of this one, but for some reason, I was thinking the main character was a girl. A little girl. A little blonde girl. But it's not. It's a blonde boy. And this is kind of one of those horror ones that's coming of age, which I like coming of age horror stories. Like it. It's one of my favorites. And he's known, like, a lot of people recommend him for this time of year. And, like, I would love to read some of his other works. Like the something called October something. I have to look that up. Let me see. Well, let me see if it says it. It doesn't have it on here, but October Country? Maybe that's what it's called. I want to read that one. But, like, a lot of people recommend reading his work for this time of year. But the first time I read, of course, Ray Bradbury was Fahrenheit 451, because that's one of those books that they assign you in school. And I read them, and I really enjoyed that one. But this was really good. It's very creepy. It's a creepy carnival. I also love creepy carnivals. And I just love this. This is one of my favorites now. And it was just so fun and, like, and just, like, one of those be careful what you wish for kind of scenarios where, oh, you'll get what you want, but you might not like it. There is, of course, a price, and there is a price to it. That kind of scenario. And I also really like this cover. Like, I like I love the typography and the like, the circus tent type style, border around it. I really like that one, but like I said, I want to read some of his other ones that people recommend for this time that also have similar, you know, like autumnal theme to it. Because now I'm not in school anymore and I don't have to read certain books. I can read what I want. Although that's how it's been for a long time, because I have been out of school for quite a long time. But yeah, this was so great and so much fun. Classic horror stories actually really entertaining. Can be really entertaining. Like, I also read, I forgot to show you, but I did read H.P. Lovecraft, some of his stories. I've only read 4 of them so far. And, one of them, the first one in that collection, I remember the story from listening to the audiobook for that one. And, but he kind of is, again, one of those authors who writes kind of science fiction horror. That's the vibes I'm getting, where, there's, you know, creatures and, monsters and probably some time traveler, you know, that kind of horror, where it has a science fiction element to it. Again, he's another author that people take issue with, but I really liked his writing, and I don't support the way he was. His value system, his beliefs, I don't support that, but I like his stories. And I acknowledge that there's probably a lot of elements put in his work that show some of the not so nice traits about his personality. So, and then I also see. So obviously, I don't know if you know, but a lot of my horror has been in the last. That's not Stephen King has been in the last couple years. So I've just been kind of getting more into horror. Like these last 3 books. Okay, so this is another horror classic that is something you might want to check out if you liked the show. Although it's more psychological horror than, you know, jump scare type horror. This is a haunted house story, and it inspired King himself, like especially with Rose Red, which was not a book; it was a screenplay that became a miniseries he produced he produced. I don't know if he was involved any more than just a producer and writing the screenplay. Because he did try directing once on a different feature based on one of his books, and it did not go well. I mean, even I think he regrets it. Doing it, but I think this did inspire. And they referenced Shirley Jackson in the miniseries, like, you know, Joyce Reardon, one of the main characters, quotes Shirley Jackson, and probably it's a quote from this book. So yeah, it says. And it actually says inspiration for the series. And there's another adaptation as well with Owen Wilson and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I don't remember the actors who played the main woman, and Liam Neeson is also in it. And that one is probably intended to be based more on the book than the series on Netflix. But it also was, I don't think it was the best adaptation. It was not good. And, I mean, it doesn't even include really the backstory of our main woman in that movie. We don't get any of that, I don't think. They focus more on the haunting part. Again, it's one of those ones where, are our characters just crazy, or is there really something going on with this house? And what's really cool is that the house, like, it changes. I mean, this is part of what inspired King, is that the house changes and, you know, it moves around, and, like, you can easily get lost in this house. But it's so fun to read. Like I said, I do want to reread it at some point. Like, I should reread it now while I'm thinking about it. But it's very creepy, and, like I said, I think because I'm so spoiled by movies and TV shows, sometimes it's hard for me to get into a book right away. A horror book, because I'm used to the visuals of a movie or TV show. So when I have to stretch my imagination a little bit, then that's a little harder, in which it's funny because I love reading, but I'm not going to give up movies or TV, and I don't think that's a crime to watch movies and TV shows. I don't think it's bad. Just, you know, find the balance between, I think it's important to try to find the balance between reading books and watching stuff. And I think that there's just some people cannot get into physically reading, you know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I need to reread this book, and I want to reread this year, possibly. But yeah, I think it's great. It's one of the haunted house, and I think people will probably like this better than some of these other ones, like the older, you know, like, because this is more early 20th century. Like, this was published in the 50s, I think. But yeah, I definitely want to reread this one. Like I said, normally I participate in October, every year in October, but now I think I'm kind of in the more spooky mood as far as books go. Maybe that's because I'm getting more into horror. That's not just Stephen King. Okay, so, before I get into the Stephen King adjacent book, let's talk about this one of the longer horror books. This is the same guy who wrote, Wallflower. Perks of Being a Wallflower. And this was a horror book he wrote about this. It's about a 6-year-old who gets an imaginary friend who may or may not be evil and dangerous. And he's told by this imaginary friend that you have to build this treehouse by Christmas. And it kind of explores good versus evil, and like, and it does explore Christian themes a little bit, but it's not, at least to me anyway. Of course, I'm also Christian, but to me, it's not like in your face about it. It's not like preachy about it. It focuses more on the horror elements, and but it does explore the issues that people face when they are religious, and especially through this one teenage girl's character, where she's trying to be a good girl, and she's told, if you give yourself to a guy, then you're gonna go to hell. You're not gonna go to heaven. And she's a very religious family, and she tries so hard to the point of it gives her anxiety, and it, like if she does anything wrong, like is home a minute late, a few minutes late from coming home, then her parents are gonna she's gonna get in a lot of trouble. And it's just this. I want to reread this one too. See, when I talk about these books on these videos that I haven't read, like, even if it's been only a year, when I start talking about them, all of a sudden I want to read them again. Unless I didn't love it. And it just, she is really struggling to be a good person. She's like, well, if this happens, it's a sign kind of person. And so we explore religion in that way. And I really like that the mom is the main character in the story, and she's not just automatically dismissing her child's encounters. She still tries to protect her child, but she doesn't dismiss it. She doesn't, oh, it's just your imagination, or, oh, you've been watching too many scary movies. It's kind of, actually, and it has vague inklings of it in this book. Except for there's no evil clown from outer space. But it has inklings of it with some of with the premise and everything. Like, it feels like it was inspired by it. By the book It. With our and I really like how the mom is just, which I would love to see this on screen, like a mini series, or like a regular TV series. I would love to see that. It would be great to see this. I mean, they gotta find the kids. They might have to age them up, because it might be hard to find 6-year-old kids that will act in this. They might have to age the kids up to like 10 or something, because our main character Christopher is 6. But yeah, I want to see this on screen. I know a lot of people don't like adaptations because then they're they don't meet our expectations. They change things. They end up doing their own thing. Hollywood ends up doing their own thing and not respecting the original source material kind of thing. So people basically they don't trust adaptations, but I still love the idea of adaptations, because watching movies and TV shows was my first love. So I'm always anticipating, an adaptation. Despite the fact that there's been a lot of them are bad, but I'm also someone who's easily is like, not impressed, but I'm not as critical, or as like, this isn't a good adaptation. I'm more, oh, well, it's a different thing, But I would love to see this one adapted. And I like as I was saying about the mom, I really appreciate that she is involved in the story, But not, and like, she's raising this kid on her own because she left her boyfriend, and her husband the father of her son died. So she was with this other guy, and he wasn't that great in their suggestion, and he was abusive towards her. So she was constantly worried he was starting using Christopher. And so eventually she finally runs away. And she does get another second chance at romance. Joyce from Stranger Things reminds me of the mom in this a little bit. It's like Joyce Byers makes me think of Joyce Byers from Stranger Things a little bit. Like a younger Jonathan or Will, I guess would be Christopher. And it's just such a cool concept, and also kind of has a science fiction feel to it, because there's the characters going into the treehouse takes them to a whole nother world, or like, a world, that concept of the world where you can see like a parallel universe but where you have a window into our world, but other people can't see you because you're in this other place. Kind of that feel, if that makes sense. But it was so fun. I'm glad I bought it. I was enjoying it when I got it from the library, and then I decided it's so long, so I'm just gonna buy it, and I love it. Like, and Stephen King blurbs this. Oh, wait, no, actually, no, he doesn't. But it does compare it to Stephen King's work. Like an epic horror on par with Stephen King's The Stand or Justin Cronin's The Passage trilogy. And like I said, there are similarities to it in this one. And I love it. It's so fun, and I definitely recommend it. Okay, and then we have... Okay, so this is the Stephen King adjacent book that I have. Because actually, this is Stephen King's son, Joe Hill. And, oh, great, I'm going to have to tape this again. I'm going to put some tape on this part. My copy's falling apart. Like, I actually got wet because I brought it with me to work, and then the water bottle, I had it in my lunch bag, and I realized that's not smart. I should put it in one of the pockets on the outside. So I'm going to have to tape this. I have been tempted to buy a new copy, but then I feel bad giving this to someone else. Granted, it's not terrible, but like I don't have room to keep multiple copies of books, so I'll just tape it up. And it just shows how loved it is, even though it was an accident. This is, again, like, it has Stephen King feels to it. And he writes like his dad. And this was actually also a series on AMC. There's a lot of shows that I need to watch on AMC. Which I have to check and see if this one is still on the air. Because then I might actually be able to watch without having to pay money. But we have a very this is has more vampire elements than Dracula, because our main character is our villain has vampire-like qualities to him, but he doesn't bite people. He just sucks out their energy via his car, his Wraith. He kind of steals their life force and turns them into monsters like him. Vampire type monsters like him. And like this is in reference to Nosferatu, the famous vampire that was created in the 20s. And like we have a main character who is really good at finding things. And it's very creepy. Again, it's a long story, but still really fun and creepy, and like there are some slow moments, but mostly it just keeps moving, and you don't know what's gonna happen. You're just anticipating, and I like that. Yes, our bad guy is just the shadow that's swimming there, but he's involved in the story. Like, we get a lot of flashbacks of his actions. Like, we go back and forth between the past and the present, and then once we're caught up in the present, then the bad guy is not just some ominous shadow looming there. Like, he is involved. He gets involved. He is like one of those he's back kind of scenario. And although like he's a monster you expect to be a monster, but the character that makes me the most sick is his assistant that he hires, Bing Partridge. And I cannot really remember. Maybe because I'm looking at the book, I also remember that guy's name. And he is a human being. He's an actual human. He hasn't become a literal monster like our main antagonist. He is a little monster, like not just a human that acts like a monster, but he is a literal monster. He's like a vampire type. While Bing Partridge has not, he's still very human. And sorry, I just got distracted by something on my pants. But then he's like someone who never really grew up, never really matured. He's very messed up, and iconic. And some of the things he does, like you have our monster, our bad guy who kidnaps these children and takes them to Christmas land because he believes that they are being treated unfairly by their parents, and he gives them immortality and so that they could stay kids forever. And then he tells Bing, oh, you can go after the parents and do whatever you want with them. And he does whatever he wants. It's deserving what he does to these parents. Like, he drugs them and does some things to them that are just make me so uncomfortable and absolutely terrify me. Just, like, this is scary, and I hope I never have to deal with someone like this. I mean, some of the things that happened while reading this, I was like, I had to remind myself, this is just the story. I'm in the real world where these characters don't exist, and this guy is not doing anything. Because, reading about adult characters and parents makes me think of the people in the parent, what would happen to my parents if this was real, or what would happen to my sister and with her kids. That, like, I picture them in this, like, when I read these books like this, I will think about my own family and my own friends. And it creeps me out. So this is the last book I'm going to talk about. Horror-wise that I've read. So I've not read a lot, but I definitely want to read more. I want to get more into the genre and try different authors some more other than Stephen King. But I have a really, like, I like the genre, it's just I'm very spoiled by movies and TV shows. So if you guys read horror, maybe you can recommend some stuff to me. Or, like, although I kind of like finding this stuff on my own, though. But if you want to recommend something, because you really want, I definitely still feel free to share. And in the comments section below. And I hope you like this video. And, if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell icon if you want to be notified by my latest videos. And I hope you are enjoying your reading right now, currently. And whether you're reading, like, getting into spooky stuff, or reading just reading cozy stuff. For this time of year. So I will talk to y'all later. Alright, bye.